Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Sue Peck, founder of Evolution Financial in Madison, Wisconsin, on the show today. Sue started her firm in late 2017, so about a year and a half ago, after spending some time working in a financial planning firm and after having career changed into this industry. She saw that she wasn't going to be able to do the things she wanted to be able to do if she continued to work for someone else, so she ultimately decided to launch her own firm. The first few months were rough as she just did not see the traction that she was hoping for, and she started to really struggle with the failures she was experiencing. She shared what it took her to get her out of that downward spiral, or funk, if you will. She's been growing quickly since then and is well on her way to her initial goal of building a business that would provide time flexibility as well as money to vacation more with her husband. She just wrapped up her first ever client event, which was a success and really awesome to hear more about how that was executed and how she's gained so much energy from that experience. She has some big projects coming, including onboarding at XY Investment Solutions, our in-house TAMP for XY Planning Network members, which will help her continue to build a business that supports her great life. Is bookkeeping a major pain point for you? If so, you're not alone. Many financial advisors hate bookkeeping, and guess what? They're often terrible at it too. Enter the Bean team at FA Bean Counters powered by XY Planning Network. Their free chart of accounts template will help you tackle one of the most basic but often incorrectly done bookkeeping tasks. Visit fabeancounters.com/XYPN to download the template and learn how to set up your chart of accounts like a pro. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/202. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Sue. Hey, Sue, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alan.
So just for listeners' benefit, could you give me a quick overview of you and your business, where you're located, number of clients, when you got started, if you have a niche market, and then we'll dig into the details.
So I am in Madison, Wisconsin. I started a year and a half ago in September of 2017. I have about 29 clients. As far as a niche goes, I started and was like, well, maybe my niche will find me because I didn't know exactly where to go. It's one of those when you leave a bigger firm and you're used to taking whoever walks in the door as long as they have enough money, you don't really know who you want to serve. But I've slowly started finding my niche in people who are kind of hitting their stride in their career and kind of backing up and saying, wow, it's about time I start getting my stuff together. And those are the people that I'm kind of looking for right now.
Fantastic. And I do think that process of finding a niche is one of those things that we talk a lot about having one, and we're still working through how to best make it actionable, if you will, to really be able to say, here are the things that, the process you can go through to figure out that niche and figure out some of it's just exploring your own expertise and figure out, what you're an expert in. But anyway, we do find that sometimes it takes time, and that's just part of it. So.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about sort of your career path. Have you always been a financial planner, or did you career change into this industry?
My career path is fun. So I started off in college as a psychology major, which I believe Kitsis was as well. And I left wanting to go into advertising. So I moved up to the Twin Cities and I interviewed at a bunch of advertising places. And then the economy kind of crashed. So no advertising agency was hiring. So then I found a recruiter who found me a job with an investment advisor. I wasn't old enough or mature enough to be working at that investment advisor at the time. I was doing a lot of partying. I was not very responsible. They kept me for about a year and a half and then kind of sent me on my way saying, we're still family. It's going to be okay, but you need to leave now. So after that, it was a whole lot of still being pretty stupid, still kind of trying to find myself. I did all sorts of things from working in marketing for a magazine very shortly, did collections for a cell phone company, And basically the purpose of that was to get myself out of credit card debt, because I had made so many mistakes and had gotten myself into so many issues. And so when I found myself into just kind of hitting my rock bottom, I'm like, okay, well, do this job that I found doing collections, and basically just ate ham and cheese sandwiches and bagels until I was out of credit card debt using that job. So then I left that job. Ironically, I left collections to get out of credit card debt and moved to work for a wealth manager as I started moving more positive in my life. So with that place, I started off in front office, didn't feel like it was a good fit for me. I did some compliance in there as well. And then I moved to back office and was doing, reconciliation and reporting, and it didn't feel like a good fit for me. So then I moved into a securities trader position, and that didn't feel like a good fit for me. So then I asked the president of the company, I think I want to work with clients. And he's like, oh, it's about time you realize that.
Let you come to that realization on your own.
I think it was being in the trading room and being away from everybody and not having anybody to talk to, that I just felt so alone and realized that I really like talking to people. Other people had been trying to get me to go in that direction for years. So I'm like, well, maybe there's something to it. So then I moved over to start working with clients. I worked on getting my CFP and I got that. And I'm like, wow, I finally have a good fit. This is great. And so then I did that for another year and a half and went, this is still not a good fit. And that was when I left and started my own firm.
So what do you think it was about those, various positions and just like what was and was not a good fit? Because I feel like a lot of people don't have that realization that a position isn't a good fit, for a really long time. So what was it that you were sensing, I guess, that made you feel that way?
I think, well, it started off just the company itself wasn't a good fit for me. And I kind of knew that in the interview. I just really liked the person who was interviewing me. She is now actually my outside compliance professional that I work with. So that's pretty fantastic because she has a long story as well. But for me, it was just, maybe it was the people I was working with, how I interacted with them. And a lot of times I would get in trouble with different relationships I had within that firm. And I'm now realizing that maybe I just had a strong personality and that's why it wasn't working. So maybe it wasn't them, it was me. But in the end, we were having these great conversations about, how can we help people who don't have a lot of money? How can we really expand our services to help all of these other people that we've never focused on before? And I was getting really, really excited about it. And then at one point, one of the partners came into one of our meetings and said, nope, we're not going to do this. We're going to stop talking about it. We're not going to do this at all. We're going to go back to the way that we've always done it. And that's it. It's done. And I just sat there going, but it was such a good idea. And I eventually ended up talking to a friend and I was just like, it was such a good idea. I don't know why we're not going to do it. This is crazy. And he said, yeah, really, there's only one solution for you. And I'm like, yeah, what is that? And he's like, you need to leave and you need to start your own firm. And I just sat there looking at him and then I started pacing and I'm like, what? And he's like, well, we both know you want to do this. And I'm going, I don't think we both know that.
Maybe you know that.
But, he was right. So yeah, it was interesting. I came home that day and looked at my husband and said, hey, what do you think about getting rid of 2/3 of our income, adding a whole lot of expenses and stress? What do you think of that?
Sounds like a sales pitch if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. And he's just like, if that's what you want to do. And at this point, we had been married for 5 months. So that was interesting.
Nothing like layering on some additional stress.
Right.
Yeah. It's always crazy how we all came to the realization of, listeners know my backstory of getting fired and finally just being like, okay, well, I'm kind of tired of getting fired. So I guess I'll just start my own firm and work for myself. And for you, it really sounds like it was that realization that you wanted to be able to do things a certain way. And that opportunity, ultimately is going to get shut down. I attended a Zappos culture camp training a couple weeks ago now. Anyway, so it was a 3-day deep dive into Zappos and a lot of the culture training that they do. And one of the takeaways that I had was they said, in a typical company structure, one no kills a project. You have an idea and you talk to your manager and maybe they say yes, they talk to their manager, they say yes, but then it goes to someone else and they say no and it's done. And just being cognizant of that as a business and how to open it up so that one no doesn't kill a project. Maybe there's an opportunity to create it so one yes actually lets a project happen. And just, really interesting philosophy around that. But that's what I hear in your story is just like one guy can come in and say no and suddenly you can't do it. And how much of a struggle that is for someone who's trying to do something more. And it just can be so challenging.
Right. And that was actually my introduction to XY Planning Network too. I had never heard of it until the group of us started working on that whole project. And somebody came in and said, so here's the Garrett Planning Network and here's the XY Planning Network, and they're kind of doing this. So let's do some research into those. And I'm like, okay, well, let's do some research. And I started researching it. And I'm like, oh, this sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. So what was it like starting to explore? I mean, you had this realization, oh, well, maybe I should go work for myself, get your husband on board. What was the time frame from when that decision was made when that initial conversation happened to when the decision was made of, yes, this is where I'm going?
So I'm very much one of those, like, I'm going to make a decision and I'm going to move on it. But at that same time, I knew that I needed to save up some money. So it was quick and not quick at the same time. So it was about 6 months from when I said, hey, I think I might be able to do this to, okay, I'm starting. And part of that was, there's the money thing and we want to save it up. So we did put together a new budget to figure out how much more money we could save. And then I knew that I was going to be getting a bonus later on that year. And I'm like, I have to stay employed until I get this bonus because this bonus is going to be another 6 months of mortgage payments. And that's kind of needed. So stuck it out until I got the bonus, which ended up being bigger than expected, thankfully. And then, ironically enough, finding the time to quit was really difficult because I wanted to quit in front of two people that I really cared about. And they were basically gone the entire month of September. There were 2 days that they were both going to be there at the same time. And I'm like, please don't let either one of them be sick because I have to actually turn in my notice one of these 2 days.
Talk about stressful. And because you want to give them the respect of being able to have that conversation, not hear about it via email, but also like if they're not there, it's kind of a challenge.
Right. And like it was my boss and probably, it was one of the partners of the company who was probably the reason, as I told him 6 months later, he's the reason why I stayed so long and he was the reason why I left. He was an incredibly caring person and I really, really like him, but he was always stressed out. And I kept watching that thinking, I don't want that to be my future. I can't have that. So if I'm not going to turn into him, I have to figure out a different route.
No, that's awesome. It's also, I'll say, we used to have a bonus structure here at XY that was a once a year bonus. And then we ended up moving to quarterly and we ultimately ended up eliminating it because of some research that we did based on the book Drive and just overall motivations. But it is a really good reason to not have a bonus structure like that for folks who are out there, thinking about how to build a compensation package for advisors, just because it does hold people on the team who may not want to be there. And I'm not a fan of holding hostages, but also it does create this risk that like everyone's going to leave in a very tight time window because they're all waiting for that bonus check. That's why January is a popular month to change jobs. So just other random caveat, thinking about as you tell your story that, you don't want a bonus or that your compensation package to be aligned in a way that's, not necessarily moving the business forward. So just a random thought.
Right. And I know that you and XY are reading the book Traction and working on that. And we had been doing that at my last company as well. And so every Monday morning we would get together for these meetings and we would talk about our big rocks and our goals. And the last 2 months that I was there, I kept getting this pressure like, Sue, you need to be working on better goals than these. And I'm just like, I have a big goal. I just can't tell you about it.
Just can't talk to you about it. Yeah, and that's also the disappointing thing. And I'll say, like, this is easier said than done, but I hope we can create an environment here where when someone makes a decision to start their own business, they can come tell me. because I would rather facilitate it than be fighting against it, because it just creates a stress. To me, a 2-week notice is a failure of leadership and management, because it means I didn't create an environment where someone could come say, hey, in 6 months, I want to start my own business. How can I maximize the time I have here while also, being able to move towards my goal? Because that would be much more productive for you and for me as the manager than, you are working on these other things and I'm not aware. And then we're both frustrated because, I don't understand what's going on. So I'll also put it out there again, that's easier said than done. A goal, I think, as a manager should be that, we can have those conversations, but I also recognize it's very risky as the employee to have that conversation with your boss, because you don't know if they're going to walk you to the door or not.
Right. And I was actually at that point when I put in my 2 weeks notice, I was hoping to be walked to the door. I had an office that I had already, signed the lease and had everything all set up on the other side of town. I wanted to start working on my website. I needed to have the time to be able to do that. So when I turned in my notice, I was hoping they would walk me to the door so I could start working on all of that. And instead, because they trusted me so much, they asked me to stick around and help with some of the transitions for my clients. And I'm like,
but I have other things I want to go do. So how did that work for that transition out? So how long were you ultimately still there for?
It was only about 4 days. And unfortunately, it worked really well. There are many of my former clients who were very happy with the people that I assigned them to. Had I done those transitions a little bit less good, I might be able to get some of my clients now, but I moved them to the right people, which is what I wanted to do, but not long term.
Right. Were you able to take any clients with you, or were you starting over from scratch?
I started over from scratch. There was a 1.5 year non-compete, so that basically just ran out last week. And, maybe I'll be able to get a client or two, but I doubt it, to be honest with you. I was kind of in the beginning stages of working with clients on my own at that point. So I don't know if any of those clients realize where I'm at now as far as skill level, which is vastly different from where I was then. But yeah, I definitely started off from scratch.
Yeah, it is a good point that ultimately, if you haven't been working with those clients for years, like, you just don't have that relationship. They sort of still have the relationship to the firm more so than to you. So talk to me about the launch process. So you said you already had some office space. When did you go through the RIA registration process, sort of in line with your departure from your previous firm?
So I had everything in place. I think I filed everything about a month before and asked for everything to kind of be, approved but delayed. So they took care of reviewing everything and saying, "Yep, this is all good. All of this is in place. We'll actually file it the moment you tell us to." So that felt really good because I knew that all of that was there. I had my office space. I had ordered business cards. They arrived a week before I quit. So I had all of that stuff in place. It was just a matter of, okay, I'm just gotta wait for my U5 to be filed, and then I can go.
So this was your outsourced compliance expert had pulled all this together. You had not actually submitted it to the state at that point.
No, I had submitted it to the state. So my outside compliance, she had put everything together as far as contracts, as far as my ADV. Like, she had put all of that stuff together many months before. And then I contacted the state and said, "Hey, can I file this, but not have you do anything with it until I tell you to?" And I had heard from other people that the state of Wisconsin is cool with that. And so they're like, "Yep, that's totally fine." So they reviewed everything, contacted me and said, "Everything is good. Everything's in place. You don't need to make any changes. Just let us know when you need to, when we should actually file it."
Now, let me just give a caveat to this. The state of Wisconsin regulators are fantastic. As listeners probably know, that's where I started my firm. Most states will not do what you just described.
Correct.
So,
yes.
You may, if you think you want to try this, just contact your state regulator. Their phone number and email is on the website of every state. And because that is an ideal situation where you're sort of able to get things queued up, I'll say a lot of states will require you to file that U5 change or U4 change as part of the sort of submission process. And if you are with a big firm, they actually monitor it. So if you're with a broker dealer or a very large RIA, they actually they monitor the fact that you had a change in your I guess it's the U5 that then shows up in their system, and they find out, oh, you're registering an RIA. Smaller firms usually aren't monitoring it, but they could be. So we just put that caveat out there. That is an awesome way that you were able to get started. Some listeners may not be able to take advantage of that, but that's really ideal.
Yeah, I absolutely double checked first and said, is this going to be okay if I do it this way?
Yeah, I remember the Wisconsin regulators just being awesome. Did you get the 6-month, regulatory check-in?
I did, and we had the same person.
Really?
Yes, we did.
Too funny.
Which he shared with me, and because I was mentioning that I was a part of the XY Planning Network, and he's like, "Oh, I did Alan's audit
back in the day." That is awesome. Yeah, and that's just, some states do a very heavy scrutiny of the documents before you register. Other states like Wisconsin do sort of a cursory check. They, check the boxes, but then they come visit you after 6 months just to be sure everything is on the up and up. So I guess just to jump ahead a little bit, because I know some listeners are terrified, advisors are terrified of the big bad regulators that are going to come in and shut our firms down. What was your audit experience? Obviously, we had the same guy, so I assume it's going to be fairly similar. But what was your overall, I guess, the experience that you had of being audited? Was it as bad as you thought?
Absolutely, it was not as bad as I thought. I was scared out of my mind. My compliance professional asked if I wanted her to be there to just sit there. And I so appreciated that, because she's like, I have a couple other people in Madison I want to see. I'll just sit there while you're going through it and not say a word. She said like one thing, and it was super smart, and I was super happy about that. But he was just such a really nice regulator. And his main purpose of being there was to make sure that I was doing the right thing for the clients. And that was all he really wanted to check. I mean, he checked all the documents and everything like that. And, I sent all of the information to him, but he really just wanted to make sure that I was doing right by clients. And I really appreciated knowing that that was what the audit was going to be at 6 months. He asked me to pull up a financial plan. I pulled one up, and I pulled up all of the background information. He's like, okay, I see tax returns. I see a pay stub. And he's like, this is good. This is really good. And so I felt really good about going through all of that. And he basically left by saying, do good work. And that kind of gave me a little boost going into the next day. Like, all right, I'm doing good work.
Yeah, that obviously my experience as well. He was great. I do remember him being totally baffled by the fact that all of my files were electronic. That when he got there, I just handed him a thumb drive, and he was like, where's your financial planning documents? Like, it's all on there.
I actually had him log into Right Capital.
That's awesome. So just logged in to check it out.
Yep. Well, I put all of the documents into Right Capital and said, why don't you log in there? And that way you can see my client experience as well as see everything in the vault.
Yeah. I just, I guess my review would have been late 2012, early 2013. And I remember Wisconsin was still trying to get their heads wrapped around data security and what can be online, what can you get a wet signature on? That was a big question of like, well, should they have to sign the financial planning agreement with a pen, or is it okay that I used, HelloSign or whatever it was at the time? Yeah, and I just want listeners to hear that story, to know that, the regulators are actually not here to give you a hard time. That ultimately, the regulator's job is consumer protections. They want to be sure that we are taking care of our client. We are not stealing their money, and we are not, doing things that we say we're not going to do, and that we are actually doing the things that we say we're going to do. So, my thing, just don't run a Ponzi scheme. Like, you're probably okay. There are some states that have a little bit more, restrictions and things that they're looking for. But for the most part, it's not, RIA compliance is not nearly as scary as some people make it out to be. And quite honestly, for the folks who are in the broker-dealer world, I know their compliance folks like scare them about RIA compliance. Of, oh, no, you can never do this on your own. And it's like, yeah, it's really not that bad. So talk to me about the launch process. So you're getting started, you're able to make it quickly, sort of do that transition quickly. You're not bringing clients over, so you've really got to hit the ground running, fresh out of the gate. So what was your process then, and what did you do to ultimately go out and start getting clients?
So I started networking like crazy. And I was just looking for every single free networking event I could go to because, of course, I wanted to save as much money as possible. And I'm still kind of there. I don't pay for a lot of networking, but yeah, I just started going out and finding everybody I could to let them know that I had started my firm. And I had one friend who about a week in was like, yeah, we want to become clients. I'm like, this is fantastic. I already have a client. And that was my only client that I brought in 2017. So I believe I made $875 and like 75 cents or something like that in 2017. Killing it. So yeah, I was doing all of the things. I was posting on LinkedIn. I was telling everybody I possibly could, and it was just going nowhere. And it was during that period of time that I was actually super happy I had an office to go to because it forced me to go to the office every single day and then go home. Like, no matter what, I had this routine. I was going to an office. I would be in my office from 8 to 5, and then I would go home. And if I hadn't had that, I think I would have spiraled downhill fast because things were just not going anywhere. And even that one client that I got, I don't think they gave me any of their information to actually do the plan for another 4 months. So I'm like, yay, I have a client that I can't do anything on. And so I felt just useless. And I was going out to all these networking events, and people were telling me how cool it was that I'd started my own business. And they were telling me all of the things that I should be doing. You know, you should have a blog, you should be going here, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. And I'm just like, I'm a financial planner. I just want to do financial planning. And that's not even a part of what I'm doing right now. And I was just getting so frustrated with just spinning my wheels. But I know that all of that mattered in the end. It was just at the very beginning. It was really tough.
Again, I appreciate you making that point. You're showing the real side of what it is to start a business. And the reality is when you don't have any clients, there's no financial planning to do. You know, we think of, all right, I want to start my own firm so I can do financial planning the way I want to do it. And yes, that's absolutely the long-term goal. But in the short run, you got to get clients. Otherwise, there's nothing to do. So, you know, people will ask, well, what's the day-to-day look like for someone who's starting a financial planning firm? The answer is 95% looking for business, whether that's, you know, marketing, sales, networking events, writing blogs, out meeting centers of influence. I mean, there's so much you can do, but, you know, you really should, you know, think about, or, you know, I don't know, sort of a 6-month launch plan of, all right, what are all the things I'm going to do from a sales and marketing perspective? Because I promise you will have time to get the financial planning stuff done. You just have to budget as much time as you can to getting those first clients.
Right. And I remember going out for coffee with another financial planner, and she was telling me all of the things that she wished she would have done in her first year back when she had the time to do them, because she no longer had the time to do them. Right. And so I kind of put that on my list. Like, these are all the things I need to do. I need to start figuring out my processes, my procedures, things like that. But when you don't have a client and you don't know what you're going to do to work with that client, and you're depressed and you're wondering how you're going to make the bills, and you just start this, like I said, downward spiral of everything is wrong and I'm not doing anything right and I'm a horrible person and I'm obviously stupid and I'm forgetting how to do financial planning because I haven't done it in 3 months. And you're doing all of that. Processes and procedures are the last thing you want to do because you're feeling so bad about yourself. So how could you possibly put anything together that would matter? And it's really tough.
So how do you get out of that spiral? Because once it starts spiraling, you know, it's almost like you need a big win to make it stop. So how did you ultimately sort of pull out of that?
Yeah, that was getting my second client, basically. So I got my second client at the very end of December that year. So I say that I didn't get her in December because I think I got my first payment from her in January. But I hit January, and there's a thing that happens in January where people start realizing they have to get their finances together. And so I started getting phone calls and I started having meetings. And I'm like, whoa, this might actually work. And I actually had a pretty decent January of a few people saying that they wanted to move forward with me. And so for me, I hate to say that it was, you know, getting business that actually like brought me out of the spiral. I would love to say that I was strong enough to just do it myself, but it was getting business and being able to do the financial planning and actually like getting paid and thinking, okay, this could actually go somewhere. I might actually be able to do this for a living.
Where did yes, in January, people start looking for a planner, but where do they go to look for one? Were they just Googling or looking on XYPN site or NAPFA site, or I guess where were they actually finding you to be able to reach out during that time? Do you remember?
There were that second client came, it was the relative of a friend of mine who knew that I had started the business. And so she was client number 2. Client number 3, I believe he was actually an XY Planning Network referral. And that was kind of interesting. So he called me, or he contacted me, and he was not in the state of Wisconsin, and said that he had found me through XY Planning Network. And so we set up a phone call and started talking. So I'm, offering financial planning, and he's talking about all of his student debt and all of his credit cards and how he just can't make ends meet. And I just sat there so confused on my end of the phone, just like, why are you talking to me? I don't understand. What about my profile made you say, I'm going to reach across the country and contact this person because this person's right for me? And so I just sat there so confused. And I was, of course, not very polished or practiced at that point. So when he was done talking, my response was, what do you want from me? And he's like, I need an accountability partner. I need somebody to help me get out of this credit card debt. And I just sat there going, this is not a service that I offer, but this is my people. Like, this is my guy. I want to work with this guy. And so I basically made something up on the spot and then put together a contract right after, because I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? How do I have to change my ADV to offer this? And I got to figure out how to do this because I want to work with this guy. And he's still a client, and he's doing just fantastic. So that was client number 3. Client number 4 was actually somebody who had been a prospect at my previous company and had told me, reach out to me in October, which I knew was going to be after I had launched. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'll reach out to you in October. So I did. And she disappeared. And then, then in January, she's like, oh, I think we should talk to you. So from all over the place, I guess, to answer the question in a really long way.
I'm really curious about the client that you said, or this prospect that shows up and he has a need that your service model didn't fit. So what was your service model before? I mean, during that meeting, what did you have to offer, and what did you ultimately add or change in order to make your service accessible to that client?
Yeah, so I was doing either one-time financial planning or ongoing financial planning for clients. And then I had asset management as an offering as well with financial planning. And what he was asking for just didn't fit into any of these. He wasn't ready to give me $2,000 for a financial plan. That just wasn't going to happen. So I ended up offering a coaching service. And my coaching service is basically more of those kind of short-term goals, whether it's somebody wants to get their credit score up, they want to buy a house. In his case, wants to get out of student loan debt and credit card debt and start to get his finances organized, people who need budget help, things like that. So I started offering a coaching service that is, a little bit less expensive than the other services, but still will help them reach their goals.
So how are those services currently priced then for the sort of the different service models that you can offer?
My coaching service is $125 a month. I do not have any set period of time that people need to remain on it. I'm debating whether or not I should make that 3 months or 6 months or something like that. A one-time financial plan, I've been about $2,400 for a financial plan, around there. I started off a little bit cheaper and I've moved up to $24. And if then they want ongoing financial planning after that, it's $1,800 a year charged monthly. And if they want asset management, it's depending on the level they're at. Like if they have less than $300,000, I have the financial planning fees kind of separated out. So they're still doing $150 a month. And then above $300,000, then everything moves to just an AUM fee.
How did you come up with the $2,400 up front and then the $1,800 a year? How did you ultimately derive those numbers?
So I viewed myself as being around $200 an hour. And I started off as $175 an hour. Then I like $200 more because I'm worth it.
Easier math. I always thought 180.
Also
I thought
easier.
180 was a good number because then it was like when I was doing hourly work, it was easily divisible by every minute. But yeah, 200 just sounds better.
It's easier math. It is true. And I was at 2000 for a while, and I knew that I was spending more than 10 hours on each one of these plans that I was doing, but I just couldn't get past that $2,000 mark in my head. So I finally, at one point, was like, I think it was in the month of July of last year, I had so many prospect meetings, and every single one of them ended up being a client. And I realized after that month, I had brought on way too many clients in 1 month. And that was a big mistake. And I said, okay, you have to ask for more money. You have to make these people say no. And so I upped it to 24 at that point because it was a reasonable thing for me to move to. In my mind, I could do it. And it hasn't made a lot more people say no. But maybe I'll go up again sometime.
Still is uncomfortable. I'll never forget Cheryl Garrett with the Garrett Planning Network was the one who recommended her advice on setting your fees was when you get comfortable saying it, raise it till you're uncomfortable saying it. Because there is a point at which like you just get good at sales. And at some point you're like, yeah, it's, X number, it's $2,400. And you're like, and it's almost this moment of like, gosh, I don't even know if I really want to do this work for $2,400. Like maybe they'll say no just so I don't have to do it because it's not enough money. And that's when you need to raise your fees until you're a little uncomfortable saying it and excited to do the work, with the person in front of you.
But I do struggle with that still because I started this off, and like I was saying, the person who reached out to me where I started this coaching program, like these are my people. Like this is who I want to serve. And so when my financial plan starts going up and up and up, I start worrying, am I still being true to myself? Am I still serving the people I want to serve? As much as I want to get paid for my time, which I absolutely do, I still want to make sure that I'm serving the people I want to serve. And I struggle with that constantly.
Yeah. And I think that struggle is especially tough because I'm a big advocate for you should get paid to provide the service, right? That a lot of advisors say, oh, well, I'll just do the expensive plans for the people with money and I'll just do, the pro bono stuff for everybody else. And it's like, well, it's okay to get paid, to be an accountability coach or to help someone with their student loans. But you're right that there's this tension of how much do you charge and how do you package it appropriately. And I don't think there's a right answer, because a lot of it just comes down to the types of folks that you're working with. But there is this healthy tension of, pricing your service so that it's accessible, but also pricing it so that you can run it as a business and make money because you deserve to do so.
Right. And I have actually changed the coaching program a little bit in the last year as well to be, you're on the coaching program. And if you're on the coaching program for 18 months, then we'll do a financial plan. Because part of the goal of doing all of this is to start to improve your finances and start to get you to a point where maybe a financial plan is the correct move for you now. So that's the whole goal, is for even the people that might not be able to afford a financial plan up front, I want them to improve their finances to a point where it would make a difference in their life.
It's an interesting way of gamifying it of like, all right, if you stay on track for a year and a half, you get a financial plan, and we'll do that planning process. Of course, like that's when they need it, but it also sort of sets a goal of like, okay, I just need to stay on track. And then I'll do the planning process, which may not need today, but if I stay on track, I will need it when I'm going through it. So yeah, so you said if I remember right, you said 27-ish clients now, and you're about a year and a half into the business?
Year and a half, yep.
So what is the breakdown of those 27 clients? How many of those are in financial planning plus investment management, I guess ongoing financial planning, and then do you have one-time clients in that number as well?
Yeah, so ongoing, whether that's investment management and planning or coaching, is about 16 of those. The rest of them are all one-time plans. For investment management and planning, there's about 11 of them. And then the coaching is 5.
So where are you seeing the most luck and the most success, in terms of getting clients and how they're finding you? Because that is a pretty, large number of clients for, especially the fact that even going into January of last year, you really hadn't seen the traction. So that traction has really hit in the last year.
Yeah. Being a NAPFA member really, really helped. I think people do a search for who's a fiduciary in my area, and NAPFA is the site that's going to pop up. So that has really helped me. When I look at my Google Analytics, I see that a lot of the referrals that go into that are coming from NAPFA. Even when I think this was on a recent podcast, when I think this was actually Kits' podcast, when they were saying, you don't know how people come to you, and when you ask them, they say, I found you online. So then you kind of got to dig
helpful.
in. Right.
The internet.
So then
where on the internet?
Where did you find me? And if they say I was looking for a fiduciary, I know that they found me on the NAPFA site. They often know if they find me on the XY Planning Network site. For a while there are only 3 of us doing financial planning in the area, like financial planning only. And so the other 2 were way too busy and not taking clients. And so I kind of won in that picture. But yeah, it's kind of all over the place. I've actually had a couple of clients come in where I assumed they had come from different sources because I distantly knew them and figured friends had told them about me and things like that. And I think one of the coolest moments was somebody coming in and as I was talking to them, I'm like, so you came to me because your wife knows me? And he's like, no, actually, she didn't know where we were coming today. I'm just here on your credentials. And I'm like, wow, that's cool.
The CFP board's marketing spend is starting to get out there, hopefully, on being able to, make people aware of the CFP and what it means and why it matters.
Right. Just having that really, really does matter when people are looking up. Like, I knew I was supposed to look for a fiduciary. I was told I was supposed to look for a CFP. There you were. Oh, and I have my dogs on my website, and apparently that's mattered to a couple of clients as well.
I love that kind of stuff because you just never know, right? And that's why it's okay to let your marketing and your website be authentic and be you and not be sterile and washed out. Like, it's okay to show your personality, because there's going to be someone who thinks that you're totally unprofessional for having a photo of your dog on your website. And thank goodness they figured that out before they got to your office, so you didn't accidentally sign them up as a client.
I would not want them as a client. I want the client who says, they say all of the words, and then at the very end of their sentence, she's just like, you know what? We're here because your dogs are on your website. That's it, really.
I love that. So what are some of the big things that you're working on right now? I mean, obviously you've hit, you're really starting to hit your stride. And in the pre-call, when we chatted, you mentioned that maybe you're also experiencing some, I guess, relief or energy for, going into the next year.
Yeah. So I recently had a client event because I wanted to have an event to just thank all of the clients that had come on and joined me in the first year and a half of my business. I mean, that's a risk for them too. So I wanted to throw a party to thank them for doing that. And it was really cool being at this party. I had 27 people at the party, which I didn't know was going to be way too much for me to handle. So I'm really glad that my husband was there as kind of the Sue extension. But I was just hearing all of these conversations from people about how it wasn't the financial planning, formal thought of financial planning that really helped them. But, somebody was just saying, I feel like I can have better conversations with my spouse now because of the conversations we had with Sue. And I'm realizing I have these other soft skills that matter a heck of a lot more than some of the hard skills for some people. I recently met with a couple, and, one of them was saying that they resented something about their spouse and how they wished that they didn't spend all of this money on this one thing. And it was really just eating at them and everything. And, the spouse is just like, this has never happened before. You've never even brought it up. I don't understand why this is being brought up now. And instead of saying, yeah, you're spending too much money on this thing, I turned to the person who was resentful and said, so what makes you happy? And they just sat there going, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, that's why you're resentful. We need to figure out, what actually makes you happy in life. And that way you won't necessarily be resentful of what they're spending, And so those kind of conversations really it makes the relationship stronger. And it just energizes me because I know that I'm making more of a difference than just the finances. We're going to work forward and we're going to have better lives all the way around. So, long story again.
I love that. And isn't that what financial planning is all about? And sometimes we need that, I guess, kick in the pants or that aha moment of reminding of just like, yeah, this is why we do what we do. And I also feel like, just based on what you've shared, you're sort of at this inflection point too, where you're coming out of the like, oh crap, what did I do phase? You're probably still in it, but sort of you're going to be coming out of that here soon with the business. Listeners have probably heard me say that, I view it as like the first 6 to 12 months is just pure adrenaline and excitement about running a business. And then at the end of 12 months, you look back and realize you've made like $4,000. And then you sort of get into the like, oh my gosh, what did I do phase? And that can last, for as long as it lasts. Some people get out of it quickly. Some people are in it for a long time, but that's just the like, I'm not making as much money as I was before. Why am I grinding so hard? This is stupid. I should just go take a salary. And then eventually there's the light at the end of the tunnel where you get out of that phase and you really hit that, like the moment you can breathe and you're just like, okay, I'm making as much money as I was, or now I have the lifestyle that I want and things are working. And that's just such an amazing feeling when you can sort of get there. So it sounds like you're approaching it if you haven't already, but it's sort of coming for you.
And I think part of it for me was just rediscovering myself after I had worked at my previous company for almost 12 years and that I had been doing collections prior to that. Throughout all of this, I had kind of forgotten who I was and what I stood for. And so I felt like every single day for the first 6 months of having my own business, I was waking up and rediscovering something new or old about myself. Like, oh, right. That's how I talk in a situation like this. These are the words that other people use, and these are the words that I use. And so I started going through that whole process. And as I was going through that, I was like, yes, I was still very much in the oh crap, what did I do phase. But I was also like, no, this is really good. Everything that I have done in my life has led to this point. And just like 5 years from now, everything will have led to that point. So this is another learning experience. And, a year in, I knew that this learning experience was actually going to work, which was fantastic. But even at 6 months, I'm like, this is a learning experience. If it works, that's great. If it doesn't, I'm a better person for it.
Yeah, great points. So what are some of the other, the big things that you'll be working on over the next 6 to 12 months that, that listeners might be interested in, sort of the pieces that you're going to be focused on?
So I'm working on, I really, now I'm through the depression stage. So now I actually have to start working on those processes and procedures that I didn't work on in that first year when I would have had the time. So I really want to get more of those processes down and figure out how to get them into my CRM and really formalize all of those. So I'm not kind of scrambling and wondering what that next step is all the time. I'm also looking at working with XYIS. I know what I'm doing as far as investment management goes, but it's certainly not something that I want to take on full time. And I would like to have more time to actually just work one-on-one with clients. So I'll be working with XYIS. I do want to bring in more of the ongoing clients as opposed to the one-time planning clients. I really like having that ongoing relationship and really deepening that relationship. The one-time plan is a good thing to have, and I really encourage people to get it. But at the same time, there's so much more value you can get from working with somebody on a regular basis. And so I'd like to start moving more in that direction, whether it's through asset management or just having more of an ongoing planning relationship.
And just to clarify, we don't talk much about XYS on the show, but XY Investment Solutions is our in-house TAMP for advisors that are members of the network. So, and we recently went through a major transition of getting on the Orion Enterprise Technology Platform. I think we're the first ones on it, actually, and super excited because it's amazing that it's really increased our capabilities and ability to work with members. That's exciting to hear that you'll be adopting that.
Yep, that was exactly the thing that made me go, oh, now I can do it.
It's amazing. It's chicken and the egg. You need the scale to be able to access the best tech, and you need the best tech to be able to scale. So it's always looking for a technology partner you can convince to let you on before you're really where they want you, which was Orion. They've been a super valuable partner for us. And I mean, really, we have a lot of advisors just using Orion directly, and then the TAMP is using Orion as well.
And part of what I told Brandon too was just, I wanted to join XYS pretty quickly, just because I know it's going to cost me money, and I would rather not ever see that money.
Just go ahead and get used to paying it. That is fair. We do see with the TAMP, it's kind of interesting that you sort of have these three phases. You had the folks who are just starting out. They really do want a TAMP solution. And then you have this middle phase. Well, let me say the third phase is, okay, I've hit, 50 to 75 clients. I'm feeling the pain. I'm going to either have to hire an investment person or I need to hire a TAMP. That's easy because it's like, oh, I'm spending the money either way. It's that middle ground that you talk about of like, oh, well, I really do need a TAMP, but now I'm used to having the revenue. And we do find it hard to get advisors interested in the service in that middle. We're sort of grabbing them early or we're grabbing them late. We're still honing the communication to those folks because you do get used to seeing that money come in and then it feels a little more painful. It's all mental accounting. It's all the same money and the same math, but it does feel different.
Yes, absolutely.
One thing I failed to talk about, and going back to the client event, because this is something that I know we have advisors that talk about, oh, should I do a client event? Should I not? Could you just talk about how that event was structured, how where you hosted it, what you paid for in terms of drinks or food? Did you have a speaker or a special guest or anything like that? Like any recommendations just based on your experience having done it now?
Yeah, with this particular event, I didn't want to bring in a speaker because of the fact that I was just basically thanking people for joining me. So I did it as very much an open house style of event. It was at a restaurant. It was 2 hours long, and I told people they can come and go as they please. I would have food. I made sure that I had food that was also vegetarian and vegan to cover the clients who have any dietary issues. And then there was beer and wine. And really, because it was only 2 hours and it was relatively early in the evening, people didn't drink a ton, which was nice for me because I was paying for all of that. But I did work with the restaurant owner in advance and was like, I don't have a ton of money to throw at this thing. And she said, usually if we just put out like X number of bottles of wine and people see that going away, they'll realize they should probably stop. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. So we did it that way. And there ended up being way too much food. And so my husband and I got to take a lot of food home, which was delicious. But it was only 2 hours long. And really, I took maybe 4 minutes in the middle of that to just stop and thank everybody. Wanted to recognize the restaurant owner too. She was somebody who started her business at the same time I did. And we had met at a Money Smart Women conference a couple years prior. And we had just remained friends throughout the whole process. So when she said that she was going to start her business at the same time I was starting mine, I knew that she was a business that I wanted to support as I was thanking my clients. So I wanted to give her a chance to talk about what her restaurant does, kind of what the services they have were. And then I wanted to recognize my husband and I wanted to recognize my clients.
I love that. Both supporting other entrepreneurs in your area. This journey of entrepreneurship is tough. It is a tough journey, and having others along for the ride and being able to support each other and just talk about it and be able to give some business to her when she had, when you have an event, and her to be able to help you out when, she hears about a client looking for a financial planner. Always, really always important to be able to keep those sorts of things top of mind, to be sure, we're benefiting ourselves as well as sort of the community and the entrepreneurs around us.
Absolutely. I'm a part of an organization called Dane by Local. So the county that I live in is Dane County. So I'm a part of Dane by Local, which is basically like, let's figure out how to support each other in these locally owned businesses. And I just get so much energy from being a part of that. And now I own I order my office supplies locally. I eat locally, so all of it starts to matter. And you don't know when, business wise, when it's going to come back and pay for itself. But you start to feel really good about supporting all of these other people who have small businesses.
Yeah, I think you always find that it does pay for itself. It's just, it just takes some patience sometimes to see it really come to fruition. So what are your goals for the business? Where do you see the business growing to? Again, like you're starting to hit your stride. You've got this additional energy. Where are you headed? Are you going to be hiring and trying to build out a bigger company? Do you really want to focus on it just being you and outsourcing everything you can? Sort of what's your vision for the business?
Yep, that's why I'm bringing on XYS, is because I want to outsource things. I don't want to hire anybody. I realized along the lines of all of the jobs that I've ever done where I've been supervisor of whatever, I don't like managing people. So I don't want to bring anybody on because then I'm going to have to manage somebody. So no, I'm going to remain just by myself. Probably 50 or 60 clients is where I'm going to max out because I want to be able to have time to spend with my husband and the dogs and potentially go on a vacation at some point again. It's in 2022 is where it is on the spreadsheet. But really, yeah, I very much am going for the lifestyle practice more than let's grow and make this thing huge.
Yeah, and to your point, like some of that is just whether or not you want to manage. Some of that is also, where you are in your lifestyle or your life phase, and when you have young kids versus no kids versus empty nest, and that what the business can become, and all of that can also change over time. You're not locked in forever just because you make this decision in the short run. So. But ultimately, you got to make the business, you got to build the business that supports your great life. I think that's something that advisors forget to think about. We spend all of our time trying to help our clients, as we should, and we want to help our clients as much as possible. But it's okay for us to be a little selfish and say, hey, I started a business, and yes, it's a helping profession. It's a helping business, but I started a business because there are certain things I want to accomplish in my life, and be sure you're really clear on that and pay attention to that. When you're making some of these decisions around hiring, don't hire 5 people if like the whole goal was so that you could work 20 hours a week and travel more. Those are the decisions that you want to be very intentional about, and be sure that where you're headed is top of mind.
Right. And going back to selling my husband on the idea of me having my own business, what I was putting together, so I have a 24-month spreadsheet and a 6-year spreadsheet that I put together of, expenses and assumed income and things like that. So I called my husband into the home office at one point and was just like, I want to show you what the next few years are going to look like and why I keep stressing this whole budget thing and why I don't want us to spend any money. And so I showed him this spreadsheet, and we had just gotten back from our honeymoon. So we had gone to Costa Rica for our honeymoon and had decided at that point we should do this all the time. This is fantastic. And so then I decided to start a business, which of course put the kibosh on that. And so I'm showing him this 6-year spreadsheet and how hard things are going to be for a few years. And he kind of stared at it, and he's a landscaper. Like, spreadsheets are not his thing. So he's staring at it and he's like, yeah, just show me when we go to Costa Rica again. And I went to the 2022 column and went down to the vacation cell and was like, do you see that this is more than all the ones previous? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, that's when we go to Costa Rica. And I've already started, as much as, when you're financing a new business, there's a lot of creative ways that you start working on as far as getting the financing together. But I'm putting away $50 a month. And while it sounds so little, I mean, it's one of those things where you talk to your clients about it as well, too, right? Like, you're going to go on this vacation, put away this much per month, and then you'll have it paid for by the time you go. And so I've started doing that, and knowing that we're still going to, spend a little bit of money to get ourselves there at the time when we're ready to go. But there's going to be this chunk of money that's already been saved. And part of it is making it feel better for me, knowing, okay, there are things that I want to pay for, and there's a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's so we can do all of these fun things with our life.
I love it. I love keeping that top of mind and recognizing that it's going to be a sacrifice for a couple of years in order to build the business and get to the point to where, to where you can do that long term. I think it's Dave Ramsey has the quote of, live like your friends won't, so that you can live the life that they wish they could, kind of thing. Letting that short-term sacrifice, that short-term investment, if you will, pay the long-term dividends. So as we're coming to a close, I'll ask you the final question, and that is, if there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
So I totally prepared for this, which is great. So, because I've listened to literally every single one of these episodes.
Perfect. So this should be the best piece of advice we've ever received on the podcast. Here it comes, everybody.
I built that up a little too much. My bad. But I do have two because I couldn't settle on one. So the first thing is know that what you're doing is going to pay off eventually, and understand that it's the long game. Going back to those first 6 months where I was just like, I'm doing all of this stuff. When is it going to matter? Well, it eventually matters. You just don't know when it's going to. The second one is to know yourself. Until I started the business, I had forgotten that, because it's been so long since I've been in debt, I had forgotten that I was so completely debt averse. And then the moment, I started putting money on that 0% interest credit card, but the stress just skyrocketed. And I'm like, oh, I forgot that about myself. I really wish I would have remembered that about myself so I could have prepared myself for this moment. So remember who you are and remember what your strengths and your weaknesses are as you go into this, because they're both going to come up and it's going to be a roller coaster ride. And those strengths and weaknesses are going to seem so much bigger than you ever thought they were.
Well, Sue, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, share your career story, the mistakes you've made, the wins you've had. I appreciate you being so open and honest about it. Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, Ellen.
Is bookkeeping a major pain point for you? If so, you're not alone. Many financial advisors hate bookkeeping, and guess what? They're often terrible at it too. Enter the Bean team at FA Bean Counters powered by XY Planning Network. Their free chart of accounts template will help you tackle one of the most basic but often incorrectly done bookkeeping tasks. Visit fabeancounters.com/XYPN radio to download the template and learn how to set up your chart of accounts like a pro. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.